world surrounded by franchises, reboots, and shared universes. An elite team of podcasters will risk body and soul to investigate the depths of intellectual properties, one multiverse, subgenre, and trend at a time. Who are we? We're the IP Squad. Welcome to the first episode of the IP Squad. This is a show that will chart. We're using IP very broadly here because, as Hollywood does, I guess, so that is appropriate. But yes, studying franchises, trends, things that Hollywood gets obsessed with. Adaptations is the name of the game this first season. And joining me for this first investigation into intellectual property, my partner for this first season. How could it be anyone else other than Elliott Lewis?
Dun, dun.
We're talking about films based on the works of Stephen King, and specifically, we're going to be looking at ones that have been adapted more than once.
Yes. Which means, unfortunately, we will not be looking at his one and only directorial attempt. But you know what? That's fine.
Well, it helps that movie is god awful. I love whenever people ask him, "Will you ever think about directing another movie?" He goes, "No. Have you seen Maximum Overdrive?"
You've seen Maximum Overdrive?
Yeah, I've learned my lesson. We will be talking.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't understand movies, so yeah. No.
I did see. I was listening to an interview with Yardley Smith, who's the people knows the voice of Lisa Simpson, but is in that movie. And somebody was asking her about that movie, and she goes, "He just didn't say a lot." It was like, "What was it like to be directed by Stephen King?" He's like, "He didn't have much to say." And you're like, that makes sense.
Yeah, and like it doesn't help that like at that time, like we're in the cocaine years.
And deep in them.
Also, like, and he has basically published his thoughts about film.
Yes.
Like about horror films.
Yeah.
And it just really just doesn't like it Dance Macabre, and it just didn't really seem like he put a whole lot of stock into it as like a form of storytelling.
Yeah. Yes.
And also just didn't seem to get it. And also wrote the book while he was on cocaine anyway. Well, so it's a little
I mean, I will
messy.
say the only thing I would recommend for Maximum Overdrive is the trailer, because it is coked up psycho Stephen King. And the trailer is just him basically, which is great. I was going to ask about that though before we get into this. Of course, anyone who's listened to us on anything else that we've been on knows our love of Stephen King, which is why we're doing this and starting this. But do you have a favorite Stephen King adaptation? Because obviously we're going to be covering a lot of the big ones, but are there is there one or a couple that stand out to you as particularly good?
I think that Pet Sematary is probably my favorite. Like it seemed it would be kind of like, because also Carrie, what we're talking about today, is also really good.
Really good.
Like, and it's not even like a, I would say, poor adaptation of the Carrie novel. Like it's honestly pretty straightforward. Like
it's really good, and this is, we'll talk about this when we get into it with Carrie, but even we'll get to the segment that exists only for this season, which is what does Uncle Stevie think? But even he thinks this is actually an improvement on the novel, which is an interesting. But I do think like this is a great adaptation, this movie, because every change is like a pretty good one. Like the things they do, it's really faithful, and the things they do change are like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, like, and it's honestly mostly just stuff getting cut.
Yes.
Which is really it's just funny because Carrie's not even that long, like of a
No, especially in
like,
the oeuvre of Stephen King, it's incredibly
yeah.
brief. Yeah, no, I think that's true, and that's something we'll talk about. But yes, we will get to Pet Sematary this season. The couple I want to mention that we won't get to this season that I really enjoy is I really do like David Cronenberg's The Dead Zone. Uh,
Oh yeah.
yeah, really good. And then a more recent one that I fucking love is The Mist, of course. I think Darabont's The
Oh
Mist is
yeah.
just, I mean, number one, brutal, but
Yeah.
so captures the vibe of, and especially now, I just got the 4K of it that has the black and white version that because Darabont
Oh.
wanted to release the movie in black and white, and the studio wouldn't let him, so you finally can watch it in the black and white, and it is even scarier.
Okay, interesting. I because my thought about that is that like the values wouldn't or like in the original film aren't highly contrasted enough.
Yeah. It works. It really works,
Okay.
actually. And it creates that Darabont wanted to sort of feel like kind of like a Twilight Zone episode in that way. So it
Mm-hmm.
has that. It's very good. So yeah, those are two, and then kind of an outlier. It's based on one of his short stories. I think is kind of a hidden gem. Is 1408. I also think is very good with John
You like
Cusack.
that one?
I like. You weren't a fan of that one. Uh oh. I
It's
was
not
like,
like 1408.
oh, I liked 1408. All right. Well, that's all right. We don't have to agree on everything.
It's true, we don't.
I mean, God knows we'll agree more than I do with Brendan over on Meet the Monsters. So, but yes, we're jumping all the way back to the beginning. It's so interesting. This movie, Carrie. We're talking about Carrie from 1976. Written, the adaptation is by Lawrence D. Cohen and directed by Brian De Palma.
Hmm.
And the thing that's so crazy about this is, and we were just talking about this before we started recording, that this is the first Stephen King novel, the first Stephen King adaptation of the novel, and it's like right on the heels.
Yeah, because it was published in 1974 and
Yeah.
then got a paperback release in 75, and then this movie comes out in 76.
Yeah. And so they talk about this because I watched the documentaries on the Blu-ray.
Oh, good, good, good.
Yes, as well. And they talked about like this movie is as much responsible for the launching of Stephen King as the book itself.
100%.
Which is so and kind of makes sense as something as we'll look at across this whole thing is his books have always been so quick to adaptation. He's got to be, I don't know if but he's got to be one of the most adapted novelists. I don't know if he
Yeah,
actually would
I
hold
don't.
it, but it like as soon as he puts out a book, someone has bought the rights to it,
Yeah.
and for better or worse.
Yeah.
Because I do think that's something I feel like we've talked about that on some of the other podcasts where you and I have talked about Stephen King. Is people always talk about like, oh no, oh no, a King adaptation. There's so many bad ones. It's like I think there are just so many ones to begin with. There are a lot of
I
good
mean,
ones, but there's
right? Like that's the thing is like it's the vol like because right you press people on it
yeah,
and they'll say something like the Langoliers or any of the TV movies,
right.
which I go back and forth on the It miniseries,
We'll
but
get to
like
some of
then
those.
it's
Yeah,
like okay, but also Green Mile is incredibly problematic, but like Academy Awards, Shawshank Redemption, like
people sometimes forget
even in
of the
Carrie,
yeah,
Sissy Spacek and
and Piper Laurie.
Piper Laurie were both nominated for
Which,
Academy Awards. Like,
particularly, they talked about that in the diary, particularly at that time. That really did. I mean, even now, obviously,
yeah,
horror stuff is completely maligned. But then it was like, no chance. Absolutely. They're not going to even
yeah,
look at this movie. I'm so glad they did because they're both incredible in this film. But yeah, it is. Well, I think the thing about your Shawshanks, your Green Miles, Stand By Me as well,
hmm
I don't think people immediately associate those with King
exactly.
because they're not scary. And I think that's always, while King is the horror guy, I think it's like a lot of stuff. I always talk about like the movies that are the comic book adaptations, like A History of Violence or Road to Perdition, stuff like that, where people go like, well, those are comic books. It's like, well, yeah, they don't have superheroes in them, but that's sort of how I feel about King too. It's like the ones that don't have the scary stuff in them, people are like, that's King? He writes the scary stuff. And some of his
Yeah.
best adaptations are not the scary ones. So I do.
And then we have the modern problem that we are having now, where even the things that aren't scary are being made to seem more scary than they are and failing from it. I'm never gonna hang up on Mr. Harrigan's
Mr.
phone. At
Harrigan's
this
phone.
point,
Well,
I'm still so mad I wasted my life on watching that stupid
the other
movie.
thing you have too is like where they think everything is worthy of equal parts adaptation. I think that's the case with Mr.
Yeah.
Harrigan's phone. Is a distinct example of that, where you go like, oh, this was like kind of a singular concept short story. Turning that into a 2-hour movie is tough.
Because like we say, there are a lot of King adaptations. There's also a lot of King.
I mean,
And not all the adaptations are great. Not all the King stuff is great.
no, the man is maybe the most prolific like modern American writer. He just put out a novel, and then just the other
Yeah.
day I see the first excerpt from his new book. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That came out like last month. He put out Holly, and now he's got a new book of short fiction coming out in like February or whatever, and you just, the man works,
He won't stop until he's dead.
No, and I have a
And
certain
even then, there'll probably
Oh.
I mean, I guess I don't think that this would happen. I think Tabitha and his kids are pretty
yeah.
they don't seem like the type of people to be like, yeah, we're just gonna like keep putting stuff out that Dad wrote and
Well, I
just
also-
keep the cash coming. But
I feel like
I wouldn't be
because-
surprised if there were some things that came out of the trunk even after he died.
I wouldn't be surprised either, but the thing I will say, I think that unlike a lot of writers, I don't get the sense there's a lot he's putting in a drawer. It seems like if he writes something, it gets published for the most
I
part.
suppose that's true. That's true. Like, in I guess the new millennium.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like I think in terms of like the short story collection that's going to come out in February, I'm not sure
Yeah.
if anything in there is coming out of the trunk.
Right. There's a Cujo
Because
sequel
he used to
in there.
he used to do that a lot, especially for the short story collections. It's
Yes.
like, yeah, this was in the trunk, and
Yeah.
they wouldn't publish it, and I'm Stephen King, so
I am most
Now they will.
fascinated by the there's a Cujo sequel in the new short story,
Yeah.
which I'm really
And
okay.
I read the excerpt from that,
Yeah.
and it can't be any good, right? Like,
No.
there's just no way, unless
That-
like so as we also have talked about on
Yeah.
other podcasts that we are on, we
Yeah.
both listen to Just King Things, which
Yes.
is a podcast about
Which
reading the
I will
Stephen
say
King novels in publication order,
very-
and I am in the Discord.
Oh
for
yes,
that.
you're hardcore. I listen.
I'm hardcore.
You're really part of that community. Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
So I said something in the Discord like, unless it's like the same bat flies down to Florida and bites a rattlesnake that the husband from Cujo has to fight off, I don't
Yes.
think it's going to be very good.
Yes.
And I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Well,
So
that one definitely strikes of like, I had an idea for more Cujo. I don't know. Here it is as a short story. I mean, he did the same thing sort of with the Jerusalem's Lot short story, right? Where it's like, I have a bunch of stuff kind of lying around that I thought about Salem's Lot, and then I turned into the short story.
that makes more sense though, because Salem's Lot was like about the town of
Right.
Jerusalem's Lot,
There's
and
mythos
Cujo was
baked in,
about
yeah.
like kind of this melodrama of infidelity, and like it just becomes this horrible situation. And I'm gonna be honest, the dad from Cujo, whose name I still can't remember,
Nope.
it was the least interesting part of that book for me, and I don't really care what he's up to in Florida in his 60s. Like, I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the thing too, where it's like even reading that headline about continuing Cujo, like, was there any interest? Yeah, Jerusalem's Lot has a baked-in mythos, and actually a very good recent King adaptation was that Chapelwaite show. I really enjoyed.
I still haven't caught
that.
that.
Yeah, that they turned in. Yeah, they took that. Now that's an example where they took something kind of small, Jerusalem's Lot, expanded it greatly, and it really worked. I thought. I mean, give me Adrian Brody as a haunted turn of the century guy, and you're just like that.
Anytime.
That just works, man. He just fits that aesthetic so well. But yes, let's go back to 1976, and that's sort of the reason we're talking about this. Is yes, this is before there's any knowledge of this guy. He's written one book basically. At this point, that's been published and is just sort of a bestseller, right? Like it's just kind of it's so strange to think about like everybody now, wants a piece of King, specifically the mythos of Stephen King. But back then it was just like, just a book people liked that they should turn into a movie.
Just like a runaway hit.
Yeah. And yeah, none of that. And then it gets, we're starting right from the very beginning here. I mean, because even like you look at the poster for this, and it's just like in the list of credits is based on the novel by Stephen King.
Yeah, it's not Stephen King's Carrie.
Right, exactly.
As they become.
As it will be, because we will get 2 more Carrie adaptations this season on the show, of which I have watched neither. I have actually never seen another version of Carrie.
I haven't either. I've not watched Rage 2, and I have, or Carrie, Rage. Rage, Carrie 2.
Rage, Carrie 2.
Yeah, and I have not watched the 2013 Grace Moretz.
And actually, there's
Carrie.
another one. There's a TV miniseries. So technically, there are actually 3 more Carrie things coming. There's an early 2000s miniseries, which I've also...
Are we going to try to go see the musical?
Oh, God, I wish. There's actually, on the Blu-ray, they talked to the screenwriter of the movie, because he was involved in the musical, about, like, the most fun I've ever had is turning this into a musical. And he goes, because if you think about it, it was always kind of operatic. And it always led itself to be this.
I mean, the De Palma film? Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I do want to talk about, because it's something I love over on Meet the Monsters, is the promotional material for this. And I do love the tagline of, if you've got a taste for terror, take Carrie to the prom. God. And it's so mid-70s horror, because you can hear that guy going, if you've got a taste for terror.
If you've got a taste for terror, take Carrie to the prom.
I miss the kind of like monotone horror narrator. Now they've become, but it used to just be, if this is this, then Carrie is the, it's just like back when terror struck the thing, those were the days, man. But I think the other thing that's really interesting about these first 2 movies we'll be looking at, which are both so iconic, is I think it's also something that we don't see as much of in later King adaptations, where you are getting King seen through the eyes of filmmakers with really specific voices themselves.
Yes.
Because I feel like as we go forward, we'll get more into like, who is directing this, or it doesn't matter, because it's what we're talking about. It's Stephen King, so it kind of doesn't matter who's making it. But here, this is really more Brian De Palma's Carrie. And then, of course, Kubrick's The Shining. And that one is a totally different, because this is De Palma really trying to be pretty faithful to the book, but then kind of, massaging it into a film. Whereas Kubrick is just pretty much doing his own thing. Oh, yeah.
Kubrick read the book and was like, there's some pretty good stuff in here, but some of it's kind of meh, so I'm just going to do my own thing. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, I that movie I've been of 2 minds about, because it's like I get where both King and Kubrick are coming from on that.
Yeah.
But the thing that De Palma talks a lot about in the documentary is he talked about, it was just about focusing. It was just about streamlining, not necessarily the narrative, but just focusing the film. So the book has this whole sort of framing device, which when De Palma gets on the movie, Cohen's already adapted it, so he gets a screenplay that had the whole framing device of the White Commission, and the whole movie was framed in this people giving testimony.
It had all the epistolary stuff in it, like initially,
and it had sort of a Rashomon thing where people were giving conflicting testimony about what happened and what they saw. And De Palma was the guy who came in and goes, you got to cut all that. That's going to remove the audience from being invested in the emotions of the story.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was his big thing, is just like, we got to put them in it. We got to make them feel the thing, rather than, if you're doing that, then you're just focusing on the facts of what happened, and you're going to not care as much about the characters.
And the people might get bored before I can get the titties on screen.
Yes. Well, if you've seen other De Palma movies, there's a good chance you're going to get titties in any De Palma movie.
Yeah, listen, I don't. It's not that I don't believe he had some artistic, his own artistic, what's the word I'm looking for?
What?
Not credibility. That's the only word that's coming to my head.
No, I don't. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
I don't now believe that integrity, that he had some
Yes,
sort of artistic
integrity. Yeah.
integrity that he was trying to
Yes.
preserve. Like, I don't think this is gonna work. But
Yeah.
also, the man loved to put a titty on a screen. So
Well,
like, yeah.
if so much of his original screenplays are based so much about voyeurism and the darkness therein. He's not pro voyeurism, but there's a titillating aspect to his films.
Yeah.
Of course. Now, what's interesting is in the documentary, he talks about, like, now originally all the girls were supposed to be naked, but many of them chickened out beforehand and said, do I have to do this? And so it really lands mostly on Nancy Allen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who De Palma marries after this, which is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And goes on to she becomes the central figure of several more of his movies, where she's also naked in those. So it's like, I think Nancy would be right for the part of this hooker in my next movie.
Yeah,
You know?
like good for her.
Yeah, I know.
Question mark?
Yeah.
I don't
yeah.
know.
I mean, De Palma is. I find it so interesting. Because I being a huge nerd for this era of films and these filmmakers, and De Palma is one of my favorite filmmakers, titties aside. But
No, listen.
yeah.
We all love Phantom of the Paradise, John. We
Oh,
all love Phantom
I'm
of the
so
Paradise
glad
here.
which he's just coming off of. That's the movie he makes before. Oh no, he makes Obsession in between. I forgot he does make Obsession in between, which is that's lesser De Palma to me. But Phantom of the Paradise he makes in '74, which I fucking love. It's insane. And a real, like, how did a studio let him make this kind of movie?
Yeah.
But the thing that's interesting about De Palma, when you hear about the film school brats, right, of this era who all hung out together, Scorsese, Spielberg, Coppola, De Palma was the cool one. They talk about De Palma was the one who got laid. All right, because I don't know if you've heard any of the trivia about Spielberg hanging out on the set of this movie. Because Spielberg was...
No.
Yeah, so he's making this movie, and he said, Steve, come hang out on the set of Carrie. There's going to be a lot of cute girls around. And apparently shy little Steven Spielberg nervously asked out all the ladies in the cast. And they talked about this. All the women in the movie were just like, it was so cute. Little Steven Spielberg is just there going, would you want to go out and have dinner with me? And Amy Irving is the only one who did, and then they ended up getting married. So,
Interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
but the idea that the way all the other guys talk about, like, oh, De Palma, man, De Palma, and you go yeah, it's just when you see him, you go like, I think he was the one with confidence.
I mean, right? I mean, you look at Steven Spielberg now and Martin Scorsese. I believe that Martin Scorsese wasn't the one getting laid.
No. No, he's over there talking about the thing about Godard is you got to do this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They did always talk about that. Even within that group, Spielberg and Lucas were the nerds, capital N nerds of the group.
I mean, again, that makes sense.
They're over there talking about spaceships,
Yeah, like when was Close Encounters? That was
that was 78, I think. I think it's the year after Star Wars.
Like, Lucas is over here making a space fantasy, and Spielberg's like, what if aliens made you make art projects?
Yeah. They actually, one of the interesting things that you bring up Lucas and Star Wars is because they were both looking for young people, they cast Carrie and Star Wars together. So they would bring in when you came into audition for Carrie, you were also auditioning for Star Wars, and vice versa. So Lucas and De Palma were just bringing in every basically 20-something actor in Hollywood and having them read for all these parts. Like William Catt, who plays Tommy in this, was like, oh yeah, I went in to read for Luke Skywalker and ended up being Tommy in this.
Could you imagine the opposite world that we would live in, where Harrison Ford played Billy and John Travolta got cast as Han Solo?
But they read for each of those.
That's unfathomable to me.
That's crazy. Well, one of my favorite crazy worlds is Robert Englund talking about going in and reading for Han Solo, and you're like, that's a scary Han Solo. That's a lot. But yeah, it's crazy to think about. And so there's literally them going like, oh yeah, because Amy Irving was like, I really wanted to be Princess Leia. And
That
then you end
makes
up in
sense.
yeah, I know. Well, and you're going like, oh, I can kind of see that, just like I can kind of see that somebody would think of Travolta for Han Solo. And Travolta's an interesting thing in this because he's kind of the name here. Most of these people have never been in any movies before this, but
Yeah.
Travolta has the heat from Welcome Back, Kotter. So even though he has somewhat of a smaller part in it,
Yeah,
he
he says like 5 lines or something.
he
It's
he's
bonkers.
so great in this though. I just love what a dumb teenage kid he feels like in every scene when he's introduced, just cruising down the road and bobbing his head to the music, and you're just like, this guy doesn't have a thought in his skull, man.
Mm-mm.
It's so good. And everybody talks about how much they loved him in the documentary. Oh, John was just the nicest and coolest guy, which is nice to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but and then Sissy Spacek ends up in the role because her husband Jack Fisk was De Palma's production designer.
Right, yeah, because he was working. I couldn't remember what it was, but I knew he was on the film on the production
Yeah,
side.
and he had done Phantom of the Paradise with them, where Sissy was the set painter out of necessity because they couldn't afford anyone.
Cute.
Yeah, it is very cute. And then but he just kept going like, I think my wife would be right for this. And De Palma's big thing was that she was too pretty to be Carrie.
See the thing I know about this is that Sissy Spacek came in and was doing reads for Chris,
Yes.
and like right up and she was like she had thought that what De Palma had wanted was for her to be Carrie, and so she was like, okay, weird, but all
Yeah.
right. And then when they finally were doing screen testing, he was like said something like, yeah, I just don't see you as like the sex pot, you know.
Yeah.
It's like,
Which
okay,
Which
whatever.
I mean, Sissy Spacek is interesting in that case because he's not wrong about. I don't necessarily immediately see her as the sex pot, but also the idea that she is very pretty, but there is something kind of strange or a little bit alien about her attractiveness that I think works for Carrie. It doesn't take much to make her look out of place, and then to kind of subtle. Because one of the things I like about the movie is it's not a full. She takes off her glasses and she's beautiful now. It's pretty subtle, actually, her transition to prom Carrie. And I think
Yeah, like I
that,
mean, like right, the lipstick she's wearing is like a very like kind of pearly pink color, and she does put on mascara, but
mhm,
like and curls her hair, but like right, like it doesn't
yeah,
take a whole lot.
it doesn't. And I think that's one of the reasons Sissy Spacek really works for this is because, it doesn't take much for her to be kind of glammed down a little bit into being like, oh, this is just kind of an odd looking person to this. And you're like, oh, no, wait, she's gorgeous. And so I think it's one of those things where of course now you're like I can't imagine anyone else doing this, but yeah, at the time and apparently he didn't say who, but he'd seen somebody else in some other movie, De Palma, that in his head he was like, well, I didn't even consider Sissy because I'd seen somebody else in another movie and I was just certain I was going to use her without even before we auditioned or anything. And he even said at one point, she goes, well, am I really going to get this, Brian, or should I take this TV job? And he's like, Sissy, honestly, take the TV job because I really am going to use somebody else.
Weird, like right up until the last second.
Yeah, he said it was literally until she said she went in for the last screen test and she put Vaseline in her hair and wore like a dress that she had from childhood that she like changed the hem on. And she goes, all right, this is going to be my last shot at it. I'm going to completely change my whole aesthetic and just see if I can do this. And then if not, whatever, I put my best. And he said as soon
Yeah.
as she did that, it was like, oh, he goes, I didn't even call the other girl at that point. I was like, no, it's Sissy for Carrie. She's perfect. So it all worked out. And then we got Piper Laurie, who plays Carrie's mother in this, who had retired from acting 15
Yeah,
years
she
before
was
this.
out of the game for a while.
And I think it's so interesting to me that her whole interest in the movie was only because she thought it was like a dark satire and she saw it as very comedic and continues to go. I still think it's a great black comedy. And even though De Palma kept going like, well, no, it really is more of a horror movie. But whatever her vision and De Palma's vision create this amazing performance, but she really still thinks she was in a comedy.
That is so that is so interesting.
I know, right?
Uh,
I,
and
yeah.
it
And I guess at a certain point, it seems like the poem just went like, okay, yeah, keep
sure.
doing your comedy performance.
And that's so it is. It's so funny because like her performance does create like right the laugh of discomfort.
Oh yeah,
Like when she's talking to Sue Snell's mom and like proselytizing and like, oh, the children are uh sinning every day or whatever. And
yeah.
Sue's mom is like, well, I'll drink to that. 1 second.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
all read these.
I love that
Like,
turn too from I'm Carrie White's mother. Oh yeah, come in. It's like I want to talk to you about Jesus. Oh God. Uh-oh. Like
she's on the phone. You can see, like, you see her on the phone in the background. Like, yeah, Margaret White's here. Just let me get rid of her and I'll call
God.
you back.
Well, that's one of the things I love about De Palma does a lot of things in the movie that are sort of subtly or visually or just in character performance to really other both Carrie and her mother. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, aside from the sort of exploitational beginning of the film, just the way she's presented, the very opening scene with the volleyball, is immediately you're like, oh, this girl is not fitting in with everybody. And then the true horror of her coming out of the shower, having gotten her period, and it is just like, boy, you do not want to show any weakness or difference around because this pack of animals will turn on you.
Yeah. And it's really great that, like, the shift from the opening credits bit,
Mhm.
where, like, not everybody's naked, but like there's a bunch of girls running around
Right.
naked. But
Yeah.
like as soon as we cut to like Carrie freaking out, she's the only one naked.
Right. And it's
Like,
so stark and
yeah.
well, yeah, that I like because that really doesn't feel like it's like ooh titties. Now it is like oh no, somebody cover this poor girl.
Yeah.
And then one of the only like few truly good characters in the movie, the gym teacher, Miss Collins.
But even she like does like it is truly like such a like this story is such a tragedy, and it,
Mm-hmm.
it is spelled out so well by everyone in the movie, because even the people who try to help Carrie do their part in othering
Oh
her,
yes.
like the teacher is, I mean, this may be like a like kind of 2023 lens to come at it
Sure.
from, but like when she's trying to, help Carrie like up her confidence, she's like, well, if we just changed a few things about you, then you
Yes.
would be like normal and you would fit in. Which to me is like I'm sure that
This is the
that
total
framing
opposite.
in the 70s
Yeah.
is like, yeah, you just put on some makeup and it'll make you feel better. But like, right, it's like,
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. No, that's the exact opposite of anything is saying now.
Yeah,
Right.
like
Like
I
yeah.
would simply be friends with Carrie no matter what.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No, that's but I think there's also something to, and we'll talk about this in a lot of King stuff, is there is this sort of Americana that he's always writing to, this small town vision of stuff. So there is always, whether King means it or not, there is sort of this idea about like, well, you kind of gotta conform, right? Like it's just kind of
Yeah.
like there's an attitude of like we're sympathetic towards Carrie, but it is like, yeah, but some part of you is because even the book is so
And yes,
shitty
speaking
to
of
her.
adapting, right?
Yeah.
Like she's much more sympathetic in the film, like
Yeah.
because right, King's goes for the body, right? Like
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's because the thing is always that's what I mean. It's sort of this attitude of like, well, it's terrible what these things, what these people are doing to this girl, but at the same time, she is pretty weird. Like there is this thing, and we'll get, of course, to the running thing of King's absolute hatred for evangelical Christianity, which is just
oh yeah.
he's never hid once and finds its way into almost everything. If he doesn't have some crazy person yelling about Jesus, he's like, wow, I got to go back and rewrite then.
Yeah, hold on.
Hold on. Somebody in here can be bringing up God, right? And ruining everything for everyone. But so, yeah, I do think that De Palma does a lot. And I think that comes from, once again, he wants to put you in Carrie's perspective as opposed to the narrative framing device if it
Yeah.
had started with, well, a crazy thing happened once, and then we go to this. Instead, it's like, here's a girl, now you feel terrible for her. And the thing I love also, that Miss Collins immediately, all these girls are throwing tampons at her, and I love that the only person she singles out is, Sue, you should know better. Like, she knows everybody else is a fucking bitch. But
Yeah.
Sue, you're the good one. Come on, Sue.
Come on.
And that kind of actually does sink into Sue a little bit, where it is like, I love that also De Palma always shoots her in singles in that scene. Like, she is also throwing tampons, but she's pretty much away from the group, where it's like, oh, she's caught up on the mob mentality, but she's isolated in the frame, and she's the only one who's going to think, like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Because in some ways, because Carrie's life is so bizarre and she has these powers, I think in a lot of ways, watching it this time, Sue is kind of as close to the audience surrogate. Like, we can relate to Sue more than Carrie just because of Carrie's circumstances. And so I think, and a lot of the journey, of course, is Sue going like, maybe we should be nice to Carrie. Once again, though, maybe misguided, although, it's like, you have the right idea, Sue, but kind of just, is Tommy taking her as a pity date? I don't know. Yes, initially.
I think, yeah, initially, yeah. But like, once they're at the prom together and he like starts kind of, talking to her and seeing her as, she's just kind of goofy and really bashful. And
well, I think it's also key that they showed the scene with one of the worst fucking teachers in the history of cinema, this English teacher. But I think that's also key that they put in that scene where she likes the poem he wrote. Mm-hmm. And so there is, which, is definitely like, oh, well, he's the hot guy in school, and she's sort of, which is, very, one of the things I love about this, and this is very much this movie, is De Palma will always just let the sort of cliched high school movie play for a little bit and almost kind of lull you into like, oh, well, this is kind of a teen movie, like how long the prom goes on for. And you kind of get caught up in like, oh, she's beautiful, the Cinderella kind of thing of it, right?
Yeah, and you're like, I'm just not going to think about that bucket of pig's blood.
That's
maybe it'll all be okay. I joked with my brother came out as the movie was finishing, and I was like, this time I thought it was going to go.
Maybe just don't. And that's something I think I really like about like horror movies of this era. And I feel like something that a lot of classic horror movies would allow themselves to play more without the terror and then build up to it. Like, I was just rewatching they did a new 4K of The Exorcist, so I was rewatching that for the first time in a long time, and you realize how much of that movie there really are like all the iconic scary moments are the only scary moments, really. And they hit so much harder because you're just kind of watching this woman and her daughter live their life, and then you're like, oh shit, the devil's here.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I love about this movie too, where it's like something creepy will happen, and then it'll just kind of go on and on and on. And then and then you're like, oh right, telekinesis. Oh shit, she's gonna kill everybody, isn't she? And I just feel like so many modern horror movies are like, oh man, if we don't get them with the scares every couple minutes, they're gonna leave. And that can annoy me some. That turns into those jump scare movies that are basically film versions of haunted houses.
Yeah,
that drive me up the wall.
And like, and again, I keep harping on this every time, but it is a cool hour 46.
Beautiful. Yes, I know. I'm right there with you. I've seen particularly this. I feel like I've really hit the wall this last year in film, where I feel like every time I go to the theater, I'm like, what is this, 2.5? Jeez. And it feels like even movies that should be under 2 hours now are like 2:15. That's the thing now, where it's like, what? Get that out of there, man. Come on. And that's the thing that I do think. Once again, De Palma's whole thing was like, strip it down, simplify it, just focus everything. And some of that became budgetary, because we'll talk about the end of the movie. In the end of the book, she basically destroys the entire town, or at least like the downtown area of it. And some of that was just, well, I can't afford to do that. But in some ways, I think that works for the movie, because it's like, no, it's sort of a focused vengeance on the school and then the mother. It's sort of like, it doesn't have to be the destruction of the entire town.
Yeah.
It does it makes everything more intimate in that sense.
Yeah. Oh, I do miss the like it would have been neat to see the like the kind of catharsis between Carrie and Sue Snell. Like,
Yes.
it gets replaced with like, its very own little bitty jump scare right at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah. The dream
But it would
sequence
have
I feel like is De
oh
Palma
man,
trying to put that in there a little
Amy
bit.
Irving
Yeah.
cradling Sissy Spacek as she's dying.
Yeah.
That just it would have been really good.
It
But I
would have
get
been
it.
good.
But like, right, yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. Like
No, that
when you
that I
don't have the
agree
money.
is one thing. And then of course there's also a thing in the book that like as her powers are growing, she's mentally connected to everyone in the town and people
Yes,
are
and
hearing
like
and feeling.
broadcasting this
Yeah.
terror that
And
she's brought on them.
that would be very tough to put in a film, I think, in general. That's a very like
Yeah.
there's stuff in the book. It's the big thing with De Palma talks about the biggest change he's proud of is the death of Carrie's mother, because he's just talking about like that because that is not cinematic at all in the book. Like the whole idea that she's like stopping her mother's heart slowly, beat by beat. Right. And he's just like, there's no way to visualize that really.
Yeah, I mean, right, that's like right this whole at least this season. I don't know if the other seasons will be like that,
Yeah.
but like right, we're talking about adapting
Right.
from one medium to another.
Yes.
And we'll probably talk about this way more next episode.
Yeah.
with
Oh.
Shining.
Yeah, because like I said, this is like
But this has always been kind of a thing
Yeah.
with King, that like it just some things don't translate
Yep.
well to a visual medium, and they while they are very cool in a novel setting,
Yeah.
doesn't quite translate, and that's okay.
It's really okay. One of the biggest ones I think about that's not a King adaptation, but is Silence of the Lambs, which I love that movie. But like the end of the book is so much about she knows where Buffalo Bill is in the dark because of the connection to the butterflies or whatever, the moth.
And it's
And
what
you're
are
like,
Tom, what are you talking
yeah,
about?
which is just like, I don't know when this got metaphysical. And also, there's just there's no way to fucking film that. You could not put that on film. And so Demi just plays it as an incredibly cool, super tense, cat and mouse game between them, and it just rules.
Yeah.
That's one where I might like the movie more than the book. So the thing I was gonna say about De Palma here is the point I was gonna make is if people haven't seen it, if you're a real cinephile nerd, I highly recommend watching the documentary called De Palma, which is just him in a chair talking about all of his films. To a lot of people boring, to me riveting, and I've watched it a few times. But one of the things he talks about is, jumping us ahead a little bit, is when they make the 2000s TV miniseries, which neither one of us have seen. Apparently, it's much like The Shining one, stuff like that. Incredibly faithful. It is word for word, every beat, exactly the movie. And he talks about, he goes, you have a lot of anxiety about decisions you make as a filmmaker, a lot of neuroses about that. He goes, but I watched that miniseries, and they do her having the heart attack because of Carrie. And he goes, yeah, that was the one time I was like, God damn it, I was right. I was absolutely right to change that, because that doesn't work at all. So we have that to look forward to.
1 point for De Palma.
Yeah. I just love the idea, though, that like even as someone as iconic and beloved as De Palma is going, like, sometimes you second guess, and when somebody does the same material, you're like, oh God, am I going to be proven to be an idiot for this? I think the reaction to every version of Carrie has proven that De Palma was, because I love, we'll get to it later, of course, when we do those, but like there are quotes from Stephen King when they announced every time they've done Carrie again, he always goes, why?
Brian did it already.
Yeah, I mean, it really is sort of like,
Which,
you can move it
like,
to modern day. I feel like that's really like you can
is that what because I haven't seen, I don't think either
I
have seen the
think it does.
2013 one either.
I haven't either. I don't know if it moves it to modern day. If
Yeah,
it
I have no
does,
idea.
you're adding a lot of stuff. Like the thing that doesn't even date this movie per se is like the very, I think particularly like the hairstyles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's set in the 70s, so I don't know that it feels like it still works in the frame of what it is. It almost feels like a period piece that was just happened to be made in that period. Because I don't know that I want to see a Carrie where people are on phones.
Yeah, and I don't, maybe we will. I guess
I
again,
don't, I don't,
I
I
know nothing about the 2013
me
one
neither
really, so
because probably for the
except
same,
she flips a car. I guess
yeah,
they do in that one they
Sh-
do more of the destruction of the
and
town. That's all I'm assuming.
she flies in it too. I've seen one scene
Ah,
where she's literally flying, she's levitating around the
almost
gym.
a almost a return to King's original idea of having her turn into a kaiju. I
I
get
mean,
it. I get it.
kind of, yeah. It's sort of a, yeah. I'm sure you didn't see it for the same reason I didn't see it because of Stephen King's. Why? I went like, why would I want to watch that?
It was more of me being like, why?
Yeah, no, it wasn't even. That's what I mean.
I
It's
had
like
the
my
thought
reaction was
completely
like,
independent of Mr. King.
exactly. That's I guess that's what I'm saying. It's not the kid, but yeah, it is sort of a thing where I was just like, why would you do one of the? There are so many ones they've like blown. Why would you do one of the few like truly perfect King adaptations? Do
Yeah.
that again?
And again, like I going back to Steve being like, oh, why? Someone already did it. Like
Yeah,
there's an aspect of that that I maybe don't quite agree with. Like right, it's hard to just like separate the like, oh, Hollywood going back to the bin for,
yeah,
nostalgia money, or,
right.
this will be like, we'll just see this because whatever money, or Chloe Grace Moretz is really popular money.
Yeah,
And like, there is value in telling a story, like, whatever, like, what would that have been, like 40 years later?
something like that.
Like,
Yeah, close. Yeah,
there can be merit in
sure.
telling a story, or making a movie. I'm trying to think of what the uh there's an example that I really like of like a movie being remade because the like technology had improved and it was like easier to like
Well,
make things.
I'll tell you one that I wish had been better, and it is a King adaptation. Is I was really excited that they were going to do a new Firestarter because
Mm,
the original one it's fairly faithful to the book, but it was tough. There's problematic casting right off the bat. That's a given, but also like yeah, a girl with pyrokinesis, little tough in the '80s to do that convincingly. So I thought, okay,
yeah,
well this could be good, and then they made something much much worse.
yeah.
But
That sort of falls into why would you even adapt it in the first place for me? But that's a different conversation entirely.
that's a totally different thing, yes. But I mean, one of the big ones that it would be surprised if I didn't talk about some argument that I've had with this person, but Brendan Jones and I go back and forth on a lot is the Steven Spielberg West Side Story, which I love Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. I loved it so much, and he's of the opinion of it's fine, but why would you do it? It was perfect the first time. And I would argue there's a lot of reasons to come at West Side Story again.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new one either.
Oh, that's just fine. I mean, I really like it. I get what his criticism of it is, but also like there's a lot of things in there where it's like it's more baked into the Puerto Rican community and stuff like that in a way. Because the big thing about it is all the songs stay the same, but it has an entirely different book. It's a page one rewrite entirely on the
Interesting.
script.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a really interesting in that case where it's almost a new movie that still has all the beats of the songs. It's really, I'm a big fan of it. But yeah, no, there definitely is a lot of reasons to have it. But I do think the reaction to Carrie, I think that's another thing too, is not only did I think why, but then everyone's reaction was like, yeah, no, you don't need to watch it. Like it wasn't
Yeah,
like
like
you were going like, oh, they've really done something here.
yeah. That seems to be kind of like yeah, I guess we'll get to it with Pet Cemetery Bloodlines and the other new Pet Cemetery that
There's
it
a
feels
lot.
like they just made.
Pet Cemetery. This season will be Pet Cemetery: there's more than you think.
Yeah.
There's a few
So many
Pet
pet cemeteries.
Yeah, and you're like, for a book that is, I mean, well thought of, but I don't think it's like, I don't often hear people bring that up as their favorite King. It's one of his more well known.
Yeah, I would actually, because I was listening to a bunch of the audiobooks when I was merchandising a couple of years
Yes,
ago.
yes,
And Pet Cemetery was one of the ones I could get get my hands on the
Yeah.
audiobook
Yeah.
without having to wait, like 10 months.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's kind of slept on. Personally, I think it's a little
Sure.
bit slept on.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
No, I enjoy Pet Cemetery and particularly the movie a lot because of and I will talk up Fred Gwynn when we get there because I love Fred
My
Gwynn in that
man.
movie. Oh, Herman Munster, my friend. What couldn't that guy do though? He was more had more chops than I think people gave him credit for. But anyway,
Agreed.
yeah. Back to this movie though. Another interesting point is Mrs. Snell is played by Amy Irving's actual mother.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, which because he had done that. De Palma had done that in his movie Sisters. He had cast Jennifer Salt's actual mother as her character's mother, and he was just like, "Will that work? Can I just do that again?" Basically, was the thing. Yeah, so Priscilla Pointer is the mother of Amy Irving, and he was like, but was an actress, so and continues to be an actress. She's still alive. They both still act, which is cool. But yeah, that's an interesting. I just like this goes like, well, because it's right there, it just works. And apparently
Funny.
the fun piece of trivia is she was so disturbed by her daughter's performance at the end of the movie when she's flipping out after the dream that she actually yelled out Amy instead of Sue because she was actually
Ooh.
that worried about what her daughter was doing that like it broke down the fiction of it into like, oh my god.
Brian, yell cut.
Yeah. Oh, De Palma was there is an Amy Irving story that she tells on the documentary that she goes, I don't know if Brian didn't think I could act or something like that, but that he in the scene where she's there's the pushing on her and she's crying, and
Mm-hmm.
she was like he had all the other people just saying the meanest things about me. He had instructed them all to just say truly hurtful things, and she goes, she said, I went up to him and just went, I could have gotten there just with the acting, like he didn't have to. That I feel like is very directors of this era where it's like I want it real, baby.
Yeah.
When you hear about we were talking about The Exorcist, when you hear about the shit Friedkin was pulling on that, and you're like, dude, he'd never work
Fucking
again.
hell.
Where he's shooting off guns and shit on that set of that movie, and you're like, dude, you can't do that. Like,
You can't be doing this.
yeah, it's not cool to
Bruv.
traumatize people. Yeah, I don't know. That seems like that was what a lot of these guys were. They were looking for that. Yeah. I do want talking about as we were talking about sort of the way the movie visualizes the otherness of this. Jack Fisk talks a lot in the documentary about trying to find the exact right house to be the exterior of the White House, and I think that shot when you see Margaret go back to her house after talking to Snell's mother is great because it is sort of like, oh yeah, even their house is like the creepy house on the street.
Yeah.
And then the whole inside, of course, is a set, which is also designed based on a type of architecture that was called Father, Son, and Holy Spirit architecture
Incredible.
design. And Fisk said, I remembered that from being a kid, that there was a kind, and he goes, oh, that's going to be the thing. And all the little pieces that Fisk puts in there. There's that great shot where Carrie's looking in the mirror and there's just the fully lit Jesus face behind her. Oh man. And that's pure De Palma. That
Yeah.
deep focus kind of thing.
Do they talk about in the documentary or like the featurette or whatever,
Mhm.
like about why the Saint Sebastian
They do.
imagery?
That was
Okay.
reverse engineered. So they shot the scene where she kills Pyro, and then they went, "Ooh, can we lay in a precedent for that?"
Okay.
Yes. So that was an after the fact thing. That De Palma asked Fisk to make something that would set that up or whatever, or would echo it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Because it it is it's very disturbing.
Yeah. It just was interesting to me, like the choice of Saint Sebastian. Like I was wondering if there was like because right, she's very Jesus-y, so you
Yes.
would think it'd be more of a crucifixion kind of death, but like
Right.
you can't just kill someone by crucifying them, so I get having to like stab a bunch of stuff into her.
Right.
But and like Saint Sebastian is like kind of the only one that has that kind of imagery in his
Right.
martyrdom.
Right.
But Saint Sebastian also has like a lot of like um is used in like queer imagery. It's sort of been like
Oh,
co-opted by the queer
I did
community.
not know that.
Uh,
Interesting.
because of like a lot of Saint Sebastian martyrdom pics are extremely erotic, like you would not believe.
Wow.
So I was wondering if there was sort of like a weird
No, it seemed to
thing
just.
there. It didn't make a lot of sense though, so I was like,
I
there's no
He
way.
just wanted the visual parallel, I guess, is the idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I loved in the documentary that I did not know about, they talk about is was Piper Laurie came up to De Palma and said, "What if there's some sort of weird satisfaction to her dying?" And so Piper Laurie plays it bordering on erotic as she's getting stabbed with
Yeah.
all those. I mean, not bordering. I mean, sometimes going straight into it. And De Palma was like, "I love that." Because of course he
I
was.
love Piper
He's
Laurie. I'm so glad she got back into
I
acting.
did too. Yeah, she's wonderful. But I love that De Palma, just being the weird little freak that he is just like, yes, that's so fucked up.
Fucking sicko outside the
Yeah.
window.
Yeah,
Yes,
there.
yes.
Yeah, that's right. I'll just do it from the. When you do, one things they do talk about in the De Palma documentary is that a formative experience of him as a kid was he actually followed his father and discovered he was having an affair. Like he thought he was cheating on his mom, and he actually like followed him around and recorded him and filmed outside of his like office and stuff like that. And so you're like, oh, there explains every film he's ever
Yeah.
made. You're
Wow.
like,
So
yeah.
much stuff is starting to make sense.
you're like there. It's very rare that you get a singular story that's like that's your whole life.
Yeah.
You've done it, sir. You're just playing that out, and yeah. And actually, this is probably the least voyeuristic of his movies, and there's still some stuff in there, but he literally recreates that a kid following people with a camera in Dressed to Kill.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Damn.
I know. Of course, we can't talk about a De Palma without talking about the Hitchcock influence, because
Oh yeah.
De
Oh
Palma,
yeah.
Hitchcock is De Palma's guy, and the part that really feels the most like that is the prom and the whole establishment of the bucket of blood, right? And the way he moves from.
I mean, Sue feeling the core, like feeling the rope, and her slow like
Yeah.
walk around and realization, like like to the silhouette
Yeah.
of them holding it, like that.
Yeah.
That was just like, oh yeah, yeah. That's because I didn't know about the Hitchcock thing until very recently.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like after my most recent rewatch of this, and like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, it's
Yeah. I mean,
that's Al.
some of the, I'm a huge De Palma fan, but there are the detractors are like, he was just a Hitchcock knockoff, which I think is, number one, very reductive, and also is always that thing about like, well, everyone is drawing influence from somewhere, so it's like, yeah, Hitchcock was like his primary influence, and you see it across all of his stuff, but then on top of that, he's bringing his own stuff. But yes, that scene in particular, and just the whole dread of that, right? The whole thing, and then the gym teacher grabbing her is like, no, she's trying to stop the people, can't you see the thing? Oh, it's so good. It really does feel like because that's the other thing too, is like, well, I always think about that too when people talk about De Palma just ripping off Hitchcock. I'm like, well, a lot of people rip off Hitchcock, and he did it better than the other people, so
Yeah.
it's like he got to that level.
He did it well, so it's an homage.
That's it. Well, that's it exactly, right? You see, feels like, yeah, he really understood how to put that. And then the big De Palma visuals are the split diopter shots, which is the for those who don't know, it's the foreground and background are in focus. He uses them sparingly here, as also he uses one of his big iconic things, is split screen, which he uses. He wanted to do the entire prom sequence was going to be in split screen, is how he shot it, and then he got into editing and went, it actually was bad for pacing. So so I think, and he's smart enough to know that he goes. So then I sort of picked and chose my moments to go to it, and it is effective when it does it. Like when you have the people trying to get out the door and they're being pushed back in, and you see it from both the outside and inside. Very cool. Yeah. And so, yeah, there are little De Palma touches in here, but one of the things I like about De Palma is he has his things, and on his scripts he goes all in, and it's the most De Palma movie. But then when he makes other people's scripts, he knows it's just sort of a seasoning he can put in, because like none of that shit's in Scarface. And you're like, that's, and people go, right. And it's like, yeah, because he's like, that doesn't work. I'm not just going to jam my De Palma stuff in something if it doesn't fit. So I do appreciate that in here. Yes, one of my notes is just total himbo Travolta. Because he's just this like dumb, but that's a big change from the book, because in the book he is the worst character in the book.
Oh yeah, he's like straight up evil.
Yeah. And I think that's another good change in the movie, though, where it's more him as the bad guy pushing Chris to be worse. Like, she's already like
Yeah,
a mean
she
girl.
sucks, but like, yeah, like he is definitely more of a driving force to be like, hey, why don't you do an actual crime?
Yeah. And whereas here it's much more, it's totally hers. And I mean, literally when she's blowing him and just going like, you're gonna do this, he's like, yeah, I guess.
I hate Carrie White.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite bits, is when he's just
It's
like,
really
what?
good.
To a guy like him, she's not even a thing to make. It's just like, I don't know who that is, man. And I think that, especially once again through the 2023 lens, that reads so much more as the girl bully of high school, right? It's like, yeah, the guy wouldn't give a shit.
And it does a better, like, it makes a more successful juxtaposition between Sue and Chris, because like they're both doing the same thing, right? They're like, because those scenes are played, I think, back to back, of Sue being like, hey, would you do something important for me if I asked you? And Chris being like, you want to do something, would you do something for me?
Yeah,
it's important, right? Like, it sets these girls up as like foils for each other, and also in a much better way. I think
it really works. Yeah, those two. He does there's a lot of paralleling in this movie that is really effective, and that's one of them I like. And I also like that Tommy's just like, sure, what do you need?
Yeah.
And Billy's like, I don't know, like, yeah. I mean, nothing says idiot teen more than when he has that guy toss him a beer from another car, and then he's just actively drinking and driving. And then when that cop, and he just throws the beer to Nancy Allen. Hey, officer.
Like, he's covered in the stuff.
Yeah. Nancy Allen did say that by the end of those takes, the car absolutely reeked of beer.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that was not, but that Travolta improvised much of that also, which is great. You do see like he smacks her around a couple times, but even when he does that, he doesn't have the power in the relationship.
No,
because
she's egging him on, like she's doing it on purpose, not to say that like.
No, in this specific dynamic.
It's her kink, okay? She loves it, clearly.
That's it. You get that sense that scenario is played out many times between them.
Yeah.
So I love all that stuff. Now I do want to talk about the character of Tommy and also William Katt's insane hair.
It's beautiful.
He was a real heartthrob of this specific moment. And that was absolutely what, I mean, you can totally see that. He's a real 70s dreamboat. And of course goes on to be the greatest American hero, which Brendan and I reference constantly on our show. Because it was a superhero sitcom, so of course we do. He seems like, the way I read him is he seems like he's like, and I remember this a lot, like when I was in high school. A lot of the super popular, like when you got to that level of popular, they were pretty nice for the most part, because they kind of had no reason not to be. Maybe that was just my experience.
Yeah. I guess high school, like it. Yeah, like we'll get a little personal here, but like, I was bullied in middle school by all of the like super popular kids in my super popular guys in my middle school. Because my middle school wasn't like huge.
Right.
And so in high school, I think it was more like the degree of separation became so wide that it was like it's just not worth it.
I was going to say, like, in my experience,
but generally, like, it was weird because like I had a better like experience with the popular girls than I did with the guys,
That's
weirdly
super
enough.
unusual because even I remember being, growing up as a boy in middle school, the girls were mean to me. Like they were scary. Like a 13-year-old girl is fucking terrifying.
Oh
And
yeah.
still to this
But
day.
like they were all like fair, it was more like they were more bystanders than anything, but like
Oh,
all of
sure.
them were pretty nice in high school,
Interesting.
honestly.
Because in my experience, I always find that it's like because like Tommy's like the star quarterback guy. It was always like the running back was the shitty guy. It was always like the smaller
Mm.
guy. Like that was my experience. Was like the prom king was pretty nice. It's that third runner up for prom king who was a huge because he had something to prove. Like the guy who actually had it all kind of didn't need to be shitty to people. And the guy, but it's like but like a Travolta in this, he's an
Yeah.
asshole. Or
Yeah.
particularly the other guy, the kind of chubby other guy who ends up stealing all the ballots.
Oh yeah,
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 who
yeah.
goes on to play Detective Switek on Miami Vice, which of course I'm immediately, being the kind of person I am, I'm watching this going, that's Switek. Yeah, I'm just the DiCaprio meme.
I wonder if there's a correlation to like how good your school's sports team is, because like
I bet
none of
there
our
is.
sports teams were like
Yeah,
particularly great or
yeah,
like noteworthy.
yeah.
So like being a jock didn't really like hold like
I
the
think that's
marching
key.
band was like held more status because they actually won trophies.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is key because I think a lot of the bullying is, do you have something to prove? So if you
Yeah.
don't have the clout of the football team, like in my high school, it was a big deal. You can ask friend of the show Mike Ergoni that he could get out
Mhm.
of anything by going like, oh, it's a football thing. I gotta leave class as a football thing. Like whatever, you go, son. Which is always Gergoni walked that weird line between he was on the football team, but then when he wasn't practicing football, he was talking about Battlestar Galactica with me.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I do think that's key. It's like I said, it's always these guys, and yeah, like the way because I think Tommy is pretty sincere. Like I said, I mean, I think he's
Yeah.
taking Carrie because Sue wants him to do that, but I think he's kind of happy to do it, and then does, like, the way Kat plays it and the way De Palma directs it seems to legitimately be having a good time. It's not like he's suddenly
Yeah.
in love with her. This isn't She's All That, but he is like, oh,
But
she.
he's also not like pouting or like, just sort of sitting there quietly, like not like he's actually he's trying to engage her in conversation. Like
Yeah,
it does seem that like he realizes he doesn't really know her
yeah,
very well and like actually wants to.
yeah. And I do think now the movie kind of, because in the book it is very clear that the bucket of the head kills him. Here it's just a little bit. I mean, he does die. Obviously, he would have to.
Yeah, but it
Um,
seems that it just kind of knocks him out.
Yeah. I did think it's actually a rare show of restraint from De Palma that you don't cut to him on the ground
Yeah.
with blood pouring out of his head. Because I'm De Palma, who famously had like whole militant groups against him for the sickening stuff in his movies. He was always the guy whose movies got protested all through the 80s of this is sick and
Yeah.
twisted.
Well, I think that like well, I guess never well, I was gonna say like the whole prom like scene going on around it is pretty, but honestly there's not a whole lot of blood except for the pig's blood on
Yes.
Carrie. Like we get the teacher kind of with the blood coming out of her mouth, but it's
That's
mostly just like the fire hose blasting people into tables.
Oh, which poor PJ Souls in this movie got her eardrum burst from getting hit with the fire
Oh,
hose. Yep. Yep.
did they say why she wore that fucking hat the whole time?
She wore it in our audition, and De Palma was like, "Bring that." He thought that was
Okay.
he
You
just
know what? That
yeah, that's a De Palma
I don't know
thing.
what I was expecting.
He thought that was so cute. He just thought that was so cute. And then also she's in the movie more because he just liked her, and so he just kept going, put her in this scene too, and put her in that scene too, and put her in this
Get
scene.
Norma in the scene. Get
Yeah.
that hat out there.
He just liked her, I guess. I don't know. And then yeah, and he was just like, just keep bringing that hat. And she, in the documentary, she still has the hat. She brought the hat to her interview.
Because like her bangs are like really, really short. So and like it's much higher quality on the HBO
Yeah,
Max
right.
rip.
Yeah.
So I was wondering like, okay, did her hair just get super fucked up? And they were like, just put the hat on, it'll be
That
fine.
would make sense.
No,
No, it's just a
okay.
weird just a weird De Palma thing. He's just
Just a
like,
weird De Palma
yeah,
thing.
yeah. I mean, that's going to be actually my, instead of just King things, I'm going to start a podcast called Weird De Palma Things.
Weird De Palma thing.
Yeah, no, you're right. He doesn't really indulge in the, and even like Piper Laurie's death is violent, but not, he doesn't like spray blood. It is a rare
Yeah.
thing. If you've seen, he makes Dress to Kill not long after this, and that has some of the most lurid like stabbings I've ever seen in a movie, where you're really watching like, oh, that's like a person getting stabbed in the face. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, no, man does not pull punches. But he did have a funny story about, he said one of the studio executives was like, I don't know, Brian, it's pretty ghoulish. Does she have to get covered in blood? and he
What a stupid question.
that's kind of what he said. He goes, what do you want? Confetti? Like, what's it supposed to be? It basically was like, get out of here.
God, I don't want to see you again.
Yeah. That man was fired from the movie after that. But I do love, that's such a classic like studio executive thing. It's like, ooh, does it have to be blood though? That's kind of yucky. And the really crazy thing is they had to do 3 days of her in that, and Sissy Spacek slept in the bloody outfit and just didn't change, so she could just stay in the sticky Caro syrup.
Ugh. Oh, girl.
I know. I'm like, that's one of those things.
Commitment.
Where it's like, yeah, but that's one of those things where
But
it's
also nasty.
got to go back to the Laurence Olivier. Have you tried acting? Because good Lord, that seems unnecessary. She's like, no, because they were like, no, they put her trailer right off of the set to go like, you can just immediately shut. She's like, no, I'm staying in this.
I'm gonna stay yucky.
Yeah.
It was the 70s.
It was.
I don't know.
It was the 70s. And so, yeah, one of the big changes from the novel is the gym teacher does not die in the novel. And here they have her die. And De Palma was really set on that. Like, it's like, no, man, once the bomb goes off, there is no, like, it's just going to hit whoever's there. And I think that definitely does paint a darker picture in this movie of just like, no, anyone in that vicinity. I mean, because like the book makes it clear people survive the prom. I don't know that I'm to believe anyone survives this prom in this movie.
No, and at the end when Sue's mom is on the phone, she's like, she specifically says, I wouldn't let her go to the funerals.
Yeah, many people died.
At least 2 people died.
Yeah, and and you definitely see that, and like the terrible principal gets it.
And the English teacher, they both get electrocuted.
Yeah, man. Well, that English teacher had it coming. The fucking worst. Come on. I never had a teacher that bad who's openly like laughing at a kid's work. You thought that was beautiful, you dumb shit. Yeah, man, that is a guy working through his own issues. But yeah, and they make a point of the gym teacher, as you're talking about, getting it particularly bad. She gets hit by whatever that piece of wood is that like basically splits her in half.
Yeah, some sort of scaffolding for the decorations, I guess.
But I do, and it's in the book too that like, Chris and Billy get their own spotlight death.
Yes. Which I do think that's a little like I'm a little bummed that they survive in the movie. I could kind of forgotten that. I was like, oh, I forgot they make it out before she starts killing everybody.
Yeah,
Damn.
they do. And they also make the point of actually that Sue survives because she got thrown out of the prom for supposedly doing something to Carrie. The gym teacher misunderstands.
Yeah.
But I love when the pig's blood hits her. It's all building to this crescendo of a nightmare, and then just how long and it's just the dripping of the blood.
silence.
Yeah, and
I
it just
love that. I forgot how much I loved that.
it's
There's no music. The only sound, right, is
just
the
the blood drip,
dripping and the bucket.
and it goes on for a while, and you
You
are
just
just
sit
you're
in it.
like, oh, and you just
And then we start spiraling into how she's perceiving this moment.
yes, and the weird kaleidoscope effect,
Mm-hmm.
which is very 70s but really effective here. That's
Yeah.
something else they talked about too. Is they kept going like, well, what should be the sound of? We need a sound to associate with Carrie's telekinetic powers, and then he just kept going. I don't know, something like the psycho sting, and then finally he just goes, oh fuck, just put the psycho sting in there.
Just put it in there. It
Well,
works really
it
well.
works really well. And originally, Bernard Herrmann, who did the score for Psycho, was supposed to do the score for this movie, but died before
Nice.
that because he had done De Palma's last several movies. De Palma, once again, being the ultimate Hitchcock fan, he literally went and got Hitchcock's composer to do his movies. But I love the score to this movie. Actually, while we're on that point, I do love the way it vacillates between these scary beats and then these very delicate, almost romantic pieces. And it really adds to, as you were talking about, just the tragedy at the center of this. It feels so grand and tragic and sad. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's really good. I mean, that's the thing about this out the gate. Yeah, this is really good. We will probably not be this kind to the other Carrie adaptations. I don't know. Maybe those are secret. I don't think they're going to be hidden
Yeah, maybe
gems.
Rage Carrie 2 is
I've never seen that one
it's
either. Yeah, because once again, talk about if remaking it is why, making a sequel is really why.
like
What do
are
you?
we pretending that Sue's dream wasn't actually a dream? Like I don't know.
I had forgotten the thing. I will say, you mentioned just King things earlier. That has been very helpful for this podcast because it allows me to revisit the books without actually having to like crack them open again. So I did listen to their Carrie episode again last night after reading this. I had forgotten the thing about that the end of the book that Sue is pregnant and Carrie basically gives her a psychic abortion.
Right. Oh, right.
Yeah, like
right. Yeah.
with as like one of her dying things. It's like, and I relieve you of this burden. Weird.
Also completely forgot
Yeah,
about that.
because that's so
Weird.
weird. That's one of those like, man, I'm willing to go a long way with King, but that's one of those where you're like, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so weird. Yeah. And there's a whole thing
There's always one thing in every book where I'm just like,
well,
do you
later,
have-
yeah, we'll have to talk about Kid Orgy, of course, when we get to it. So,
yeah.
the first thing that I think everyone is just like, well, the one thing I know about this adaptation is like, we'll be cutting that.
First thing on the agenda today,
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
Cutting the kid orgy. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief.
But I do love in this that cutting the complete destruction of the town. So she kills everyone on the prom. She blows up John Travolta and Nancy Allen in the car, and then she tries to kind of just like, okay, that's over now. It's like she goes home. The whole thing of her washing the blood off, and the way that parallels the beginning too, with the blood running down her leg and the water. And this time I was really thinking, because we're doing this podcast, so I'm thinking a little bit more thematically about this, and I'm going like, it's almost like, yeah, these are two transitional moments she can't come back from. The period, and she's washing the blood, and she's terrified by that. And then here it's like, okay, I've murdered everybody. Can I wash that and just return back to who I was? And she, and then when she goes,
right, because before the prom, like before she leaves, like when she's having the discussion with her mom about going to prom, she's like, I'm gonna go to prom, and then things are gonna be different around here.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna be a normal person. Also, I have TK. Let's not even worry about that. But like, I'm gonna be normal. Like, people are accepting me.
That's a great scene. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I do love that scene where she's just like, "Yeah, mom, no, like now I'm embracing who I am, including the powers, and you're gonna I'm not gonna hear it from you anymore."
Yeah, and then like, right, this coming home and like. She changes into her, like, frumpy is not the right word, but like, that's a
it's
pretty like
it's antiquated, right? It has this
It's
sort of like, yeah,
antiquated,
it
like
has this,
nightgown, and
right.
she's like, Mama, hold me. Like she does. She wants to go back
Immediately return to
to.
child, and it's what I love. Yeah, because there's almost a, if it wasn't so terrifying, there is almost a comedic patter to that, or like an absurdist patter of like things are going to be different after this, and that's like huge mistake. Forget everything I
Huge
said.
mistake.
Yeah, never
You
mind.
were right.
Yeah, they're all gonna
Fuck
laugh.
everybody else.
One of the most off parodied things from this movie is they're all gonna laugh at you.
Yeah.
Because it is so over the top. And like I said, I think it does work to this comedic performance Piper Laurie thinks she's giving in this. Which she is giving into what a movie she was just like, what are you talking about? It's a comedy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it adds another, but like, right, yeah, it adds this other dimension to the story of this like tragic absurdity. Like,
yeah. And it's, yeah, it just sort of like, girl, you can't go back after that. You just murdered everybody.
You just killed
And
like
now,
probably 20 people.
and yeah, it's sort of like, it's like, man, if your mom didn't stab you, the cops are probably showing up. And then who knows what that would have turned into. She's going to end up in the same fucking government installation the Firestarter is.
Yeah, the
oh, what is that called?
The Institute, is right, was what's
I
called.
think it's the Institute. Yeah, you're going to end up talking to the not at all problematic Native American character.
Boy.
Yeah, there's a lot I like about Firestarter, but then that's got a lot of problems in it.
Dave.
Yeah. I understand. I the thing I always feel about that, and this is not. We'll talk about this. Well, we'll have to talk about it when we get to Shining. We'll talk about his love of magical black people. But
yeah.
But like King is a guy who thinks of himself as very progressive, and so I think is a lot. I think it's sort of thing. It's like, look at what I'm doing here. Look at this. This is great.
Yeah, the famous like, I didn't even know Mike, the kid from It, was black.
Yeah.
Until like, this certain point. Like, you didn't. And the like Odetta in Drawing of the Three, like,
oh, right, yeah.
And by the way,
yeah,
she's black.
Yeah. And if you didn't picture that, maybe you're racist.
Maybe you're the problem. Think about that.
Yeah.
I'm Stephen King, and I talk like a pretentious valley girl.
He famously does. It's so weird
famously
when you see him. It's really bizarre. But yeah, and then full on now her mother's completely lost and is just like, and I love that she's so hardcore religious that even having sex with her husband is still a sin.
Yeah.
That's how fucked up she is. It's just like, no, man, the whole thing, even for its very conservative baseline Christian purpose, sex is still a sin. And I should have known that.
Good.
And then she fucking stabs her.
And then she fucking stabs her.
And that is, I mean, of course, that's in the book too, but like, it still just is like, holy shit, I didn't know you were this crazy, lady. The other thing I'd forgotten about, and Just King things also remind me of this, is the weird, very brief reference that she might be in a Lovecraftian cult.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to remember all that. Like
she's
that,
super Christian to
that
the point of
her religion may not have actually been Christianity. It's some weird other thing.
It's like nominally Christianity, or most of the sort of like buzzwords of Christianity, but then like there's a brief thing in there that is King being such a huge nerd, by the way, right?
Yeah.
It's just all it is he goes, I'm gonna throw in a little Lovecraft reference. You kids are gonna love this. You kids are gonna love it. I'll tell you this right now, because you're all reading the same stuff I am, right? But yeah,
I'm teaching it, so you better, or else I'm gonna fail you.
That's always you never forget in any King book that he is at his heart an English teacher, right? Like it's always there's always that guy in there, which is why I think like my mom, who's an English professor, loves Stephen King, right? And it's like, she didn't like horror or anything, but it's just like, well, that guy, the writing though, and you're just like, yeah, mom.
We can tell he reads.
Yeah, he's very good. So that was always one of those where it's like, I like that you're reading Stephen King. That's good. That's good, son. I will talk about. She wrote in a book about Stephen King in the classroom, and got to go to Bangor and have dinner with Stephen King. Ooh. Which I still am like, God damn it. And of course my dad went too, because he's just like, I guess I could clear my schedule and go meet Stephen King.
Yeah,
I
it's
said,
whatever.
I said, what'd you say to him? He goes, oh, nothing. I said nothing to him. He goes, the whole time I was just thinking, what am I going to say to him? What am I going to say to him? And then it's like, oh, and then he was gone.
Yeah.
Just too nerdy about it. But they do have a signed copy of It in their house, which
Oh, nice.
but that was also one of those where it's like, I'm going to read that. Like, not that copy or not.
Now that one.
That's under glass, son.
Yeah.
But that was a big deal. Everyone who contributed to that book got a signed copy of one of his books, and so it is like
That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm like, that's one of those where I'm like, in the will, I get that, right?
Right.
I get the It book. Yeah.
I'm gonna be a good son.
Yeah.
A really good son.
Yeah. Yeah, it stabs her, and then something they talked, and then we've already talked about the image of her, pseudo. One of the things that De Palma talked about was not wanting to make it a 1-for-1 Jesus crucifixion, like the classic crucifixion.
Yeah,
it's off center a little bit, which does add and makes it more disturbing. And yes, the weird sort of sexual satisfaction the Piper Laurie plays of getting stabbed with kitchen instruments.
Yeah.
And I like the screenwriter in the documentary talks about that they knew they wanted to change that because they couldn't do her death in the book. And they couldn't figure it out. And then he said they were having dinner with Martin Scorsese, and De Palma just stormed up to the table and goes, "I've got it. She gets killed with kitchen implements." And he said the guy was like, "The fuck you talking about, Brian?" And it took a long time to go like, okay, and eventually talk him into it. But at first he was like, "What?" Yeah. Where did that come from?
Brian, this is a Wendy.
Yeah. It sounded very much like that. Yeah. But it does weirdly. I don't know if there's any specific symbolism behind that, but I mean, I guess, other than maybe
it
baseline domesticity.
It makes sense now. Like the Saint Sebastian stuff being like reverse engineered makes more sense than it being on purpose. Like even his patronage is like archers and soldiers, and like I was like I was like, is it the kind of queer reading? But like, I don't understand what the queer reading would be. Like,
I have a feeling if you told Brian De
Palma,
very
heterosexual film.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I feel like if you told Brian De Palma that, he'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Yes, even the queer stuff in Brian De Palma movies is very heterosexual because it's all sexy ladies. Yeah. Don't you worry, folks.
Carrie being a queer icon is different. So
yeah, that's not yeah.
Yeah, like literally slay queen.
Yeah. Yeah. And then one of the things they talked about that they did that's from the book is that she can make it rain stones. And that's how she ends up destroying
that too.
That's how she ends up destroying the house at the end of the book. Is she causes it to rain stones down upon the house. And they talked about they filmed some tests with it, and they talked about they could never get it to look like anything. They started raining gravel of different sizes, and they talked about it just never read on camera. And so her just sort of bringing the house down by its foundations and support beams and stuff is better.
Just makes more sense.
Then you sort of read I kind of read the ending as like whether or not that's it probably is a fatal wound from her mother from the stabbing, but it's sort of just like this whole thing just needs to be torn down now. Like whatever I am, whatever my mother's made me, like I'm realizing the destruction of this, and we just need to bury this whole thing. And I think that works. And then the big thing that he adds is the is the dream sequence, which I also like in this way of having Sue's mom talking about like, I didn't let her go to the funerals. And then she has this line about like, well, the therapist said she's young enough. She might just forget about the whole thing, which you're like, she's like 17.
It's like, this is her senior prom. She's at least 17, 18. Like, there's no way.
But that's kind of what I like about the dream sequences. It's almost her mom going, well, she'll just get past this. And the dream is like, no, she fucking won't. No. This is going to carry forever. This will carry all the way to the rage, Carrie 2. Which Amy Irving does come back for. So, I don't know. I have no idea what that is. I mean, my memory of that purely from the trailers is just like Now another girl has powers?
Sure.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all like to?
Yeah, I know, man. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, why is it such a burden, man? It seems cool. I always wanted powers.
I did too.
Of course. Yeah. So
The powers are good, actually.
yeah, man. Yeah.
Imagine that. Think about that, Brian.
Yeah. Has anybody ever thought about that? It's like yeah, maybe you should pick up some X-Men comics. Sure, it's a burden, but it's also rad.
But it's also bitchin'.
Let's see. Anything else about this movie specifically? I think this one really works. It's a great adaptation. It's a great movie unto itself that kind of has its own identity too, which is great. So something I want to do for that will be a running thing for all the movies we end up covering across this whole series will be looking at the intellectual property and the sort of canon of it. I think the answer to this one, of course, is very easy. Is like, does this go in the canon of the Stephen King adaptations? And I think we're in agreement on definitive yes.
Yeah.
This is like if you're I sort of look at this section of the show as like if somebody goes, oh, I've never seen any of this genre, franchise adaptations. What are the ones I need to see? Definitively, yeah.
Definitely.
I feel like it's going to come into like you definitely need to see this. If you're a completist, you can watch this and then avoid at all costs. They're going to kind of be the three. So, but yeah, this one is for sure a definite. You definitely need to see this one. Now, the other segment I have here that is what I call highs and lows, in which I have pulled a 1-star rating and a 10-star rating from IMDb users.
All right.
Yeah. So we'll start with the lows here. And I think this is very telling of when you talk about looking at something through a 2023 lens, because just the way this begins. So this review comes to us from IMDb user Deborah Hallinan, and the review is titled "Comedy." And it starts with, I came across a video on TikTok for a game show where they were saying popular horror movies, and Carrie was among the ones I've never watched. So I literally just watched it. Really don't know why this movie is so critically acclaimed. Someone even said it's the scariest movie they've ever watched. How? The movie was more like comedy than horror. The way the actors acted, the terribly long clapping scene before the blood was poured on Carrie, the actors' facial and bodily reaction, it really beats me how Carrie could be someone's favorite movie. All the people that made this movie popular, I don't know what to say to you. Just spoiling the hard work of legend Stephen King. Thank you very much for wasting my time, although on the bright side was giggling throughout.
Yeah,
That's something I absolutely hate when people are just like, oh, what? This is old.
yeah, like the most recent like the one before this one, Olivia and I watched this when we were living together because neither of us had seen it in a very long time. And like there is some goofy, because like it plays kind of like a goofy teen movie in some parts of it,
Purposely
leading up
so,
to
right? Like, I mean,
the prom scene, right? There are some suspenseful moments and some kind of scare. Like honestly, I mean, Carrie's mom is kind of scary.
Yeah.
Like hitting her and throwing her in the closet. I don't know.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So like there are some goofy moments, and it is very of the times. Like I will give you that, but like I don't think that but I don't agree that any of those things make it bad or like make it not a horror movie. Or necessitate a 1-star review.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
really 1 star?
I know. I'm fascinated, number one, by people who write IMDb reviews anyway, which is kind of why I always do some segment like this. Yeah. There are some episodes of Meet the Monsters where the movie's boring enough that I just read the IMDb reviews at a certain point. There are some of those where it's like, we might as well just talk about the insane people who like this movie. But let's talk about some. I mean, obviously, the 10 stars are going to be stuff. But I think here's a complete. A complete opposite reaction, and I think it is somebody who is obviously relating to this. This comes to us from Vestarian 202, and the review is titled "Sad Fact of Life." I remember reading the book in 6th grade and feeling so very close to Carrie. I was the outcast for all my schools. No matter where we moved, the monsters would find me. I wished so hard for powers of my own, but I never got them. This is a wonderfully done film and a true landmark of its kind. While the fashions and music have dated considerably, it's still a great study of how our culture eats its young alive and even encourages victimization of others through religious intolerance, social class, perceived intelligence as threat, and on and on. The true ugliness of American culture is all here, and we hope you like what you see. The sad fact is most of us nerds never get our day. We just quietly die in bedrooms and hang from swing sets. We are the ones who get punished for acting out when simply trying to defend ourselves from buttholes. Those same jerks never get anything more than a slap on the wrist, while we get suspended. Is it any wonder why so many of us die young? Some of us chose to take a few of our tormentors with us, but let's be honest, the Columbine kids just couldn't aim. That's the real tragedy, not a bunch of privileged snots. Carrie avenged us all. Yikes.
Wow, we started. Wow, they had me in the first
I know.
half. Not gonna lie.
I know. That's why I picked that one, because I'm reading going, what?
What?
Yeah.
Wait.
I was so fascinated by the idea of somebody viewing this as a real revenge fantasy, not as a tragedy, but it's just like, God damn, if only. Yeah.
I feel the same way about, like, honestly, I have that same beef with Midsommar people, but like,
oh, sure.
That's a different conversation for a different day.
100%. Yeah. I feel like that's always a weird feeling, though, when somebody likes something you like, but then you go like, oh, but you have completely misunderstood what it's about. Yeah.
You missed the point, son. It flew right over you.
Yeah. I mean, it's the David Fincher talking about Fight Club. Just recently, I was reading a thing where he's just like, he goes, I don't know what to fucking tell you why it's been embraced by the right-wing people. Jesus Christ. That's not on me, man. I thought I did everything I could. But yeah, that's very fascinating. We read a similarly disturbing review of American Psycho on the Action Shelf one time. Jesus. Where it was just, it's just like, we're still haunted by the words, showed so many creative ways to make people dead. It's like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Weird.
I do remember you guys talking about that one.
And now,
big yikes.
Now for our segment that only exists for this season of the show, which is called, What Does Uncle Stevie Think?
What does Uncle Steve think about this one?
Yeah, well, here's a quote from Uncle Stevie. This was in an interview with Playboy magazine in 1986, and he was talking about the different adaptations of his work. We may pull from the same article next week because he spends very little time on Carrie and a lot of time talking about The Shining, believe it or not. Yeah. He called De Palma's adaptation, quote, terrific, and said, I still think it's a gripping read, but it's impeded by a certain heaviness, a Strum und Drang quality, good Lord, that's absent from the film. He said De Palma's version is far more stylish.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the few ones.
It is.
This is one of the... Well, I do think, he really strips it down and turns it into much more of like a propulsive story as opposed to King, as we talked about, he loves these town portraits. Certainly by the time he gets to Salem's Lot, he really likes to widen that scope, and it is sort of how the horror mushrooms out and affects everyone. So I do think that De Palma, I think rightfully so for a film, as we've talked about, really was like, well, no, it's like it's the story about this girl and these people around her. And how the town feels, the only person you get from the town, by the way, is that creepy kid on the bicycle who calls her Creepy Carrie.
And then gets fucking wrecked.
That kid is De Palma's nephew, but his voice is Betty Buckley, who plays the gym teacher.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know why that is, but he dubbed that in. He had her dub in the Creepy Carrie, Creepy Carrie. But yeah, that was Cameron De Palma.
That's neat.
Kid on bicycle.
Kid on bicycle.
Yeah. But I do think it's interesting, too, because, of course, where we're starting here, not only is this a great adaptation from his first book, but King is actually a rare thing I think we may never hear again from him on the show is he actually thinks this is superior to the novel. He's like, I actually think De Palma got closer to the core of the story than even I did. I got lost in some other stuff, which is also a rare thing that you hear
Dang.
King going, I kind of got lost on the weeds on that one. Unless he's talking about stuff he doesn't remember writing.
Yeah, I got lost in the weeds on Carrie, but not The Stand.
Never.
No, all of that was perfect, and I'm pissed they cut it. Like,
And totally necessary that I went back and added even more.
even more stuff, all the stuff they cut.
By the
I had
way,
to put it back
the
in.
only reason we're not doing The Stand this season is because I could not bring myself to watch the Paramount Plus show again. I fucking hated it. Yeah, I could not.
I mean,
get
we
myself...
could always just talk about how bad it is.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but it's long is the other thing too. Because I don't mind the '90s miniseries, but I hated that most recent one. And
Yeah.
Not just Ezra Miller's performance, which is terrible, but yeah, that's indicative.
Yeah, no, I heard that there were a lot of problems with it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I wasn't really planning on watching it anyway.
Lot of weird choices. You can actually go back in the archives over on Panel Up and Kurgoni, and I did a review of it, and we were not fans. So yeah, 1976 is Carrie. So we're gonna jump forward. I think it literally is the next adaptation, though. I don't think
Is The Shining?
I think it is The Shining. It's Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, and I don't think there's anything in between.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's because once again, it's not like King hit, and all of a sudden it's like get us everything. You know, it really it goes Carrie. So it's 4 years from 76 to 80 is the next, and then it's so interesting that if you look at it's Carrie in 76. Shining in 80, and then in 1983 there were 3 Stephen King movies.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it takes off.
The Shining came out in 77. Okay. So yeah. 3 years between the novel being published and the movie coming out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not a huge like
Right. But it's so, you know, it's so interesting that I'm just looking at like the adaptations of King on Wikipedia and just the list of them, and it's just how it builds, right? It's like a couple years between each one until then it's just every year there's
really
at least
ramps.
one, if not multiple ones. Because then in 83, in 1983 alone, you get Cujo, Dead Zone, and Christine.
Yeah.
Which I didn't mention Christine, which I'm also a fan of. Which is talk about an adaptation that is a different experience than the book. Cuts a lot, and probably once again for the right reasons in terms of just story propulsion, but is another great filmmaker in John Carpenter making King. And I still wish Carpenter had gotten to make Firestarter like he wanted to, because I think he could have made something interesting out of Firestarter. But yeah, that didn't happen. So so yeah, we'll fill in the time when we start jumping, because obviously we're not covering everything. We're just doing the ones, but we'll touch on what happened in between the movies. And this one we're going directly to the next one, but we'll touch on some of the other ones when we jump to those. But yes, join us next week for The Shining, and of course, if you are a fan of this show and want to support us and the other shows here on the Punch Up Entertainment Network, you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.podbean.com/punchup. There you can get cool exclusive bonus content as well as help support the show. Of course, Elliott, you can be heard every week over on one of our other shows, Material Components.
Yes, Material Components. It is an actual play tabletop RPG podcast. Due to podcast time travel, I have no idea what we will be doing currently. But we will either be in the throes of an alternate reality Florence in the Renaissance era, or we will be back in space.
Hey, either way, they should tune in.
Either way.
Yeah. Do people still tune into podcasts? I don't know. Turn your dials to our podcast. Yes, but and of course, if you want more horror content from us, you can listen to my podcast, Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters. Of Elliott, you are our most frequent guest on there, so
I am a frequent guest. I am the invisible third host.
And you do talk about one of the reasons we're not going to be doing Salem's Lot is because we covered that over on Meet the Monsters, and you came on for the very special weird sequel to Salem's Lot that they made.
Yep. Return to Salem's Lot that
Yeah.
has absolutely nothing to do with either the movie or the book Salem's Lot.
Super, super weird movie. One of the weirdest things that exists in the IP
Ugh.
of Stephen King. So enjoy that. But I think we will be doing an At the Movies or Goes to the Movies episode for the new Salem's Lot adaptation that I think I want to have you and Brendan do with that for that. So that's coming out, or it's probably out by the time you're actually hearing this, but it's early 2024. And I did see King's reaction to it was just like, pretty good, made some changes I don't agree with, but I liked it.
It's like, y'all, just let him be. He's not actually gonna give a shit.
Yeah.
He's too busy writing a book and a half a year.
Yeah, man. I did see an interview. I saw an interview he did on some morning show talking about Holly, and he literally in the interview was like, honestly, I wish I was writing right now. Like this
Yeah,
it's a
he doesn't like doing anything else.
No, he really is. He goes, this is the burden of my job. I really want to be writing right now, and you are keeping me from writing because I have to talk to you about this book.
Instead of writing the next one. I'm sick of this one.
And of
already.
course the guy is gushing all over him and fanning out, and you can just that gets no mileage with Stephen King. Like he's always like, oh, thank you very much. He's polite about it, but you can tell he's like, oh, for fuck's sake, this guy's gonna talk about Cujo now. Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, you love the Dark Tower. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that will.
Are we done?
Well, yeah. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Elliott. You'll continue to join me each and every week for this this first round of our first, as I'm saying, our first investigation into the intellectual properties of the world.
Gotta find all the clues.
That's right. But yeah. Until next time, this case file is closed.
Hi. My name is Stephen King. I'm gonna scare the hell out of you, and that's a promise.